Sure, we can start. It is now broadcasting live and everyone's going to be tuning in like the finals of the World Cup. These are the students for the Critical Media as Architecture students for workshop. And we're really glad that you guys could join us to talk about your practice. For the benefit of the students, Taptık is an architect and activist and artist, and Karagya is a designer, also responsible for the catalogue of the Vardiya Pavilion. And now I'm going to leave it up to you guys.
Hi. So, for the invitation, can you turn off your mic so we don't hear you?
Okay.
So, thanks a lot for the invitation. A quick introduction of us. We are called Ona Göre. We've been operating together since 2009.
Yeah.
2005. We've been friends since 2004, 2005, and we are officially a visual communication design company and a publishing house since last December. And one of our first projects was the whole the graphical or the visual identity of Vardiya.
Yeah.
I myself am trained as an architect, but while I was studying architecture, I also studied photography in Sweden. And while I was in bachelor's of architecture, I knew that I was not going to be an architect. But I became a photographer, an artist, but then I also continued studying architecture. I have my master's is in history of architecture, focus on urban representation of Istanbul, and then my PhD is about the area where our studio is located, and I'm going to talk about that in our project.
And I'm a graphic designer. I knew that I was going to be a graphic designer when I was 15, and I guess I became a graphic designer the moment I said that because of pirated copies of Photoshop. And you know, I had the chance to study graphic design and visual communication design, as we called it. And then I gravitated towards the projects of cultural inclination, mostly like artists, art institutions, and architects at the same time, who, in my opinion, who value graphic design higher than the commercial. And I don't want to say people, but commercial applications of graphic design is less valued as a thinking practice. Anyway, long story short, but I've always had a strong connection to architects and felt a camaraderie of design thinking, let's say. So this brought us our bond to higher levels, I guess, at the same time. So it brings us to today.
We can maybe you can talk about imkan mekan, because that's like one of the first things that comes to my mind. If we because we have separate practices in our practice, we have also projects that we work together. But this one, imkan mekan, maybe is also chronologically the first one. Is the one that you were involved as a designer and as a kind of leader of the project.
So this was I don't know what to call this, like an initiative project of, okay, if I'm showing it correctly, this is our logo. 4 architects, 4 academics, actually. 1 urbanist, 3 architects, and me. We were, I was never academically involved with anything, I can say, but those people were my friends. So our personal conversations about the lack of the little people's needs in the huge metropolis of Istanbul led to us thinking about starting something that would help us have the very tiny people with not tiny people in terms of the city population, tiny small amounts of people with their urbanistic needs. So we call it imkan mekan. I can show it here. If you can see the M's here, they are not they're not 2 arcs but 3 arcs. That was the moment that I knew that this project was going to become somewhat how can I call it, like it will work out somehow. Because the idea and the representation of that idea came together quite well. İmkan mekan means imkan means possibility, mekan is space. So possibility space, you can call it. And we looked into the etymology of the words. One is Arabic and the other is Persian. So it makes perfect sense for something like this in Istanbul, like with this history and the culture. Anyway, and the M's inside the logo type give out the idea of you can just open up a new space within the confines of your language or your city or whatever you have. And what we did was basically we made workshops with in the beginning architecture students. We took a simple solution, a simple problem area like a small city square or side of a building. I'm not going into details about that, but we asked the participants to think about simple, easy to do DIY and very fast solutions. And this was in 2007. At the same time that we did these, there was a huge wave of DIY and maker communities and do-it-yourself urban designing practices springing around the world. So we were very much involved with them too. We learned from them. We tried to implement them. But the sad part of our journey was our practice only revolved around generating ideas and projects, let's say, because the only realized, I think, project that we did was we had a very small plot of land beside Muhtar's small cabin in Moda. They gave us that place to grow vegetables, and we just planted vegetables there, and we were able to generate a couple of tomatoes. But other than that, our practice was mostly just thought oriented. And at the end, we got funding from Istanbul European Capital of Culture in 2010, and we published our findings in this tiny book. And we have projects. We have the whole rundown of our project here. And after 2010. Mostly for personal reasons, because everybody moved around the world, we slowly wound down, and right now this is a fond memory for me. So as a graphic designer, I was inside this project as a citizen first, and second, someone who is interested in design. I was someone who knew that things were designed, cities were designed, and the sidewalks and the stairs, those things are human-made. For the public, it's usually like God does that, God sends the pavement from the sky and it happens. So if we were able to, make a small distinction in that, we would find ourselves successful. So I guess that's all from me. Let's go to Ali, who has a longest.
No, then I will actually move to a project. I will try to share my screen with you. Okay, that works. I hope. So this is a project that we have. Okay, this is quite small. Okay. So can you see that? No.
Screen looks black.
Okay, let's try something else. No. Does that work? Yes. So the second project that we are going to talk about, this was before the kind of establishment of Onagara as a practice, but this is a project where we too collaborated with Alexis Chanal from Chanal Architects, an Istanbul-based architectural office, and it actually started with my personal interest into the Atatürk Library. This particular image was actually exhibited in 2014. In 2014, it was hanging in the room that you are right now. So because I was commissioned by Murat Tabanlıoğlu to do a set of images on the kind of architectural heritage of Istanbul, let's say. And it was almost 1 year after the Gezi Commune, and I was a bit frustrated with the modes of, let's say, opposition or kind of discussion around the sites that we are losing. For example, right now, the Alfred Heilbronn Botanical Garden in Istanbul is actually going to be replaced, and a previous reconstruction of the kind of Ottoman religious authority will be kind of built in its place. So it's a reconstruction, but it's something that erases kind of modern heritage. But following, for instance, this case is actually active since 2012. Every year there is kind of one bit of newspaper articles that kind of gather around one time. You can see a lot of kind of dissent in social media. Everybody criticizes that, but nobody does something about it. And usually we start to kind of complain about these issues once it's too late. And when I visited the Atatürk Library, I thought this building is actually really too small to be a kind of the public library of Istanbul at the year of 2010. So, but it's a really beautiful building by Sedat Hakkı Erdem. It's just behind Gezi Park and across the Faculty of Architecture, where I used to study, Istanbul Technical University. And the idea was to, before it kind of becomes endangered, how can we go on and intervene and kind of suggest something? So we have done quite an extensive research about Sedat Hakkı Erdem's ideas about the building. I mean, the building is based on an hexagonal plan, and it's kind of an elevated structure. It's not an open shelf library. Most of the books are stored here, but the above part is used as the reading hall. And what we did at the end was we created a programming around the second Istanbul Design Biennial? Second one. In the second Istanbul Design Biennial called Cevher. Cevher means actually gem. So it relates to the kind of diamond-like shape or hexagonal shape of the building, and also it's kind of a very singular, pristine structure in the middle of kind of chaotic Taksim Sea. And we really wanted to imagine the future of this library. So one of the things that we did, we created this user questionnaire in the form of metal boards. You can see them here in shapes of hexagon. And these little like kind of metal plates stated certain questions of like, how do you like the library, which areas of the library you use most often, and like kind of we were suggesting certain certain ways to kind of intervene. Here you had like bunch of magnets, and you could like pick up some paper and then like kind of write your ideas about one of the questions and like pin it to the magnetic wall, which had enormous turnout, by the way. So it's really it's still there. The library is still using it as a complaints and suggestions board. It like the intended questions were never directly answered, but like a lot of issues around the library, like kind of the officers or the workers in the library could like kind of it established a dialogue between the like users of the library and the staff of the library, basically. So these plates, by the way, I mean, this beautiful coloring and design is again by Okay. I mean, so we also like kind of put some of these items around the library. This was our little like kind of library cat mascot, where he had like kind of papers that you could like kind of take away. The second thing that the second programming around the library that we did in 2014, that was a library walk in Beyoğlu area. So we started off with Atatürk Library and like kind of went around all the libraries around İstiklal Street and down till South Galata, and we it was a public walk, and we could like kind of really meet the librarians, learn about their facilities, about their problems, or about their needs, and it was also in one way trying to establish or like kind of establish a network between these libraries. And actually right now 4 or 5 of these libraries, they are sharing their databases together. I mean, if we had a little bit of salt in this kind of beautiful soup, I will be really happy. So these are some images from that walk. It was about like 15-20 people. Again, we have like, this is the documentation of like kind of the complaints board. And the last thing we did was we did a one-day symposium-like event at the Greek school, which was the main venue, and it was used as the kind of main venue, which was library past, future, and now. So we have talked about like there were like basically 3 panels. One focused on the past of the Atatürk Library, how it was built and how it was conceived, and what part of the kind of major planning decisions it was. The second part was about different artist groups using libraries and like kind of because the library was also used a lot as an exhibition place before like the year 2000 or so. And the last one, we have invited 3 different actors from libraries abroad. One was the Library of Alexandria, which is in Egypt, a like kind of really big institution that offers workshops. It's almost like a huge cultural center, and like it's not only a library, but it's also like kind of an education, almost like an educational institution. It houses a planetarium. It's a really top-notch library. The head librarian was with us, and they shared the programming. The Amsterdam, the Library of Amsterdam's, like the Public Library of Amsterdam's director came and like kind of explained his practice. And we had also the architect of the upcoming Library of Oslo presenting the kind of the architectural program of the the structure should actually open this year or next, or maybe
I guess. They were all interested in what can a library do next, as in it's not just a building that houses books that people go to, but how many different programs that we can fit in the building. And it was a nice a thought journey with built examples actually that we learned about.
So Jevher has become really one of the projects that we're quite happy with. But we had considered it as a kind of 2-year or 3-year program, but unfortunately due to first of all funding problems, and also the way it is really hard to build lasting collaborations in the case of such events. I mean, when once events like biennials are involved, sometimes these things are considered projects rather than long-lasting engagements. And as you know, projects always have an end. A project, you project something, and at the end the projection is finished. So this will bring me to a kind of personal case. And how are we? Okay, that will be in 5 minutes. I can also talk about that. So since 2013, I mean, this is something I consider my kind of coming back to architecture. I am mostly doing photography and writing around arts, but in 2013 I was documenting plant life in Istanbul. I was I had this series called Tours of Flora, and I was documenting how people intervened and kept alive plants, how they used them as part of structures or as placeholders, or how people gave different functionalities to plants in Istanbul's urban context, in the city streets. And that led me to the vegetable gardens in Yedikule while they were demolished. And I saw, rather than taking pictures, my knowledge on kind of preservation and the around laws or regulations around preservation and in history of architecture. I mean, my knowledge in archives could really be helpful for the gardens. I mean, the gardens, you might for those who are from Istanbul, they might have know that they are situated next to the land walls of Istanbul. They are 1600-year-old gardens, and they were being demolished for a park, which is where you consider, I mean, everywhere in the north and south, people are kind of reclaiming parks to kind of create urban farms, community gardens, or kind of edible landscapes. Why would we do a recreational or sports park on top of a fertile soil? So the idea was actually quite related to the Golden Gate Arena campus for Istanbul's 2020 Olympics bid, which then Istanbul didn't get. And I mean, we started doing along with artists, historians, other architects and activists. We kind of focused our efforts on kind of creating workshop and kind of raising awareness about kind of historic gardens of Istanbul. And I mean, this has led to kind of petitions that were kind of signed almost by 60,000 people. And at the end, in November 2014, the former mayor of Istanbul, Kadir Topbaş, withdrew the project. And right now, the area is still in a kind of limbo. There is a urban farm park kind of thing planned or kind of designed already by ONB architects that also designed the Taksim Square. But then again, recently in May 2018, the president has like kind of stated his personal opinion about the historic vegetable gardens, and although he accepts their like significance and importance, he claims that they are completely unnecessary in this time of day in Istanbul. I mean, for me, the significance comes from the visibility of labor. It's, I mean, without knowing how long or how much effort is put into a single tomato, we become like really blind consumers. And having such an urban farm in the middle of the city was quite important for that. And also, like for instance, the gardeners or like the government has, after the 2016 events, issued the kind of neighborhood watchers. I mean, these are like kind of not official police, but bekçis. I mean, they are guards of the neighborhood. This actually, this responsibility belonged to the gardeners before. So that was also something we have to consider. I mean, if there is a garden around, there is someone watching it constantly, and he's actually also watching the neighborhood. So, but the gardeners can survive in their like kind of they need to be kind of reinvented, in my opinion. There are also like kind of opposing ideas to that, but either they have to like kind of become the teachers of like kind of all these young enthusiasts who want to like kind of grow plants in their, or grow food in their balconies, terraces, and etc., or they have to like become something like a museum where you can learn about the kind of historical practices of growing, or they might also become some like kind of touristic attraction, which would like also be like not the best case scenario, but also it could make them like, it could like help their survival. So so these are like some of the things that we do. Okay, then how do I switch back to my? Yes, we are back. So, I mean, these are three projects.
Do you have any questions? I guess we are running low on time.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Gökçe, and I have one question. As far as I can see, you are restructuring the works that has been placed in public memory, like Atatürk Library or Yedikule Bostans, and you have done this by bringing new and different disciplines together with the knowledge of architecture, and you finally mapping it in somehow with different techniques. And as I can understand, you are also using etymology to doing these mappings. And how do you evaluate this? What is the advantages and disadvantages of those kind of mappings with different techniques, and what is the importance of public memory for you? Thank you.
Public memory. Okay, I can. I mean, as the country is going into kind of a traumatic event every 10 years, there is a lot of amnesia built into the public, in especially in Istanbul's context. So I'm like kind of keeping these memories alive by creating discussions around them. It has been like quite important for us.
And you can say that language is something that we share like a city. We build it, we use it, we do things by it, do things with it. So if you are thinking in terms of designing, it's also similar, I believe, because it's something that you use, and it uses you, it forms you, and you form it. So it's a feedback loop. So and being aware of it helps you not fall into the same mistakes over and over again. So that's what we are trying to do is to understand how to work it, how to be citizens ourselves at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only like we don't. I mean, I see these projects that we mentioned. I mean, and they are kind of architecture itself, because you are basically trying to create relational structures between people and institutions that
last.
That you want them to last, that can be kind of become self-sustaining. They certainly have their own lifespans. I mean, not every project is like kind of going to last for like 10, 15 years, but
if we can put the idea of this into 3 students' minds or 3 persons' agenda, we are hoping it will grow.
Yeah.
Okay.
1 minute.
We have 1 minute left.
Okay, now Mike is coming back. Thanks for your answer, and also I believe that selecting true word or selecting the true statement is a very important thing to protect or just sustain the memory itself too. So I truly believe the feedback thing too, and thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. So, any other questions?
I'll have some quick questions. You said that you were commissioned by Tabanol for the Taptık Library project?
Not only at the this was the 1913 team set by Rem Koolhaas, and I documented in the kind of larger Istanbul context, like examples of modern architecture from a pedestrian point of view. And the main curator for the Turkish pavilion that year was Murat Tabanol.
So the library was just one part of
it was one of
project.
the like 76 buildings that I documented.
Can you? Another one that you said you work on the libraries and have symposiums and these workshops, and you come up. You further question. You question the further functions or intentions of libraries. You had any publications about it?
No, we haven't. We don't have any publications about it. I think we had a sound recording of the symposium.
Yeah,
but it was not published.
Yeah.
We have a blog about it.
We have the website cevherkamusal.info, and there you can find a lot about the kind of content that we created. The talks. I mean, we have recordings of them, but again, because of the budgetary reasons, I mean, we couldn't turn them into publication, but we have them in our archives. I mean, maybe one day.
But we can share the website with you guys, so you can check out.
Can we like put it here?
It's in the group chat.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. From what you told us, it seems like you believe in the architectural education, but not the practice. But also what you've been practicing, like what you showed us, is mostly architectural related, but I couldn't see like many overlap with your, I guess, profession as a photographer. So I was just wondering what you're thinking about architecture as a profession, and do you think design is not necessary in terms, like, I don't know, from what you told us, like DIY seems like to be the adequate solution for most of the design proposals you're telling us. I just want to see like where you see architects in this frame.
Good question. I mean, I personally have a certain very personal problem with the kind of on the architect's power and the profession, how it's run mostly, or how it is, like how neoliberal capitalist system makes architecture work, especially in societies like Istanbul or like Turkey. So I had a like big problem with that. That's why I kind of drifted away from like the better known architectural practice of like kind of designing and erecting buildings. But in the end, I see that by creating discussion, knowledge around specialty and city, this can be considered architecture as well. So, so a photo book or a good exhibition that doesn't like kind of depict or design buildings can also like kind of be architecture itself. But this is kind of a really open and big question.
Yeah, the problem I guess we see is in scale. When you're talking about architecture with a big A, you're thinking about a plot and a huge building or a huge city center being built. So we've seen those things in our lives, and we have a not so fond relationship with all these, architecture being thought of in thousands of people as the scale. So we are as two tiny human beings. I guess we need to be acknowledged. We have our desires, needs, and things that we can add to the city, basically. I guess that's why we pursue that kind of path. And that's also architecture. Does it make sense?
The big discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It feels like you are still interested in architecture, but not calling yourself an architect, trying to like run away from the responsibility, maybe. But
No,
it doesn't mean like being an architect doesn't necessarily like make you pressure you to like make skyscrapers. I mean, maybe it's about
the problem I had in my personal life is I was never called an architect because I studied architecture. I studied history of architecture. I'm doing a PhD in architectural design. I'm writing 2 architectural journals. I do research about architecture, but architects don't call me architect. So that's also kind of a problem. The architects, they really regard, architects that build and erect structures that really, they think that architectural design is the only way of doing like kind of architecture. So, and that's something I have a problem with. So, but if they don't take me in, I don't like need them.
Yeah.
So,
do you have to call yourself to be an architect? To be an architect is a question. How is a person an architect? If I build a shed in my backyard, am I not an architect? I don't know. Vardiya is about questions. I'm asking questions to you.
I have a question. We are talking about memory spaces, and I got curious. What do you think about the demolition of Atatürk Cultural Center? Did you do anything about it?
Well, we couldn't do much about it. We signed petitions. We kind of participated in protests, and we participated in discussions. But I mean the issue. I could explain that. I will not talk about the Atatürk Library. I know the Atatürk Cultural Center, but I will kind of turn the question into a case of the passenger terminal in Karaköy, which was demolished last year. As you might remember, it was a kind of a modern protected building, and the company that was supposed to renovate it decided that a reconstruction is a much more economically efficient way than renovating it in its place. The same thing happened also in Atatürk Cultural Center. If by turning the project into a reconstruction project, you can add certain technologies and also you can double the area of a built area and it's kind of space, and thus the money it will bring later. But in the case of the terminal, passenger terminal, this won't be the case, as they cannot go underneath and kind of build something underneath. But the work would last maybe 4 or 5 years. It would, if they would want to renovate it in its place, and it would be craftsmen working. And now that they have kind of totally demolished it and they are going to rebuild it, it won't be the kind of previous crafts. I mean, the wooden furniture won't be kind of made by carpenters. It will be made by CNC machines, and they will be factory made. So, and I find it more interesting to talk about kind of labor and economical aspects of these projects rather than talking about the memory, because I mean both projects have the premise of a kind of reconstruction. So it won't be the same place. It will be kind of fragment of memory just thrown back, but somehow that's enough for certain people.
Yeah, I guess time will tell in that regard.
But the economical and the kind of the labor aspect is something that we have to discuss more often. And I have actually kind of said a lot of things in my lectures about these two projects.
And also I can add that when I think about Atatürk Cultural Center, I think about its programming, you know, the theater productions, the opera productions, or a little known for some exhibition center in the upper sections, upper floors. The new project seems to bring much more than that into the place. But what makes a building rather than a symbol or a living piece of architecture is is the people that work in it, the people who visit it, who make it a common place for the city folk to dwell in. So that's what's important, and the time will tell that the new AKM that will be built, I don't know how many years from now, might be very well loved. Who knows?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
that
I think that's it from our side, and we thank you.
Thank you. Well, we thank you. These were
Yeah, bye.
Bye bye.
wait. Maybe they want to add something. Do you want to add something? Is there anything that you want to add, or just saying ciao?
Yeah, I think so.
No.
Okay.
Very happy that you listened to us. Basically, you took.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for talking to us.
So, goodbye. Have a nice time. Have a nice time.